about this topic because I feel like over the past couple, probably almost 12 months, this is a really relevant topic, especially after last week. I found myself going through this presentation, kind of taking a little bit of tips that I put in there and just be like, man, I really needed to hear that because it's just been one of those weeks. So before we get started, as always, these presentations, I love to do them with you guys. I love to keep them a little bit less formal. They're here for you guys to learn and to be educational. So if you don't mind, go ahead and put yourself on mute so we aren't getting a lot of background noise. But that being said, if you guys do have a question, please drop it in the chat box. Probably what we'll do is I'll go over all questions at the very end and answer all of those. So if you guys are having to hop off, I see Josh has already started the recording. So if you have a question and I answer it after you hop off, the recording will be available on the Fitness Center website. So I think that's it for the housekeeping stuff, and we'll jump right on in. So my name is Carly. You guys are hopefully familiar with me by now. I feel like we've been doing these for a long time. I love doing these presentations with the Fitness Center, and I just love this community that you guys have. You guys are really well versed and love learning, and I love being a part of these conversations. So I am a registered dietitian and a senior wellness coordinator with URS Dining, which is who does the food service for the Houston campus. And we'll go ahead and hop right on in if I can get my mouse to where I need it. And we're going to be talking this month about emotional eating. And yeah, we'll hop right on in. If you guys have attended a lot of my presentations, you probably know by now, I like to really start with defining and what the definition of whatever topic I'm going into. So we'll start with the definition for emotional eating. And really with that, it's just the act of consuming large quantities of food, normally foods that you consider more of a comfort food, in response to any kind of feeling, emotion, versus responding to something biological like I'm hungry, my stomach's growling, things like that. So it's more acting off of your emotions and less acting off of that biological need. So a couple examples of emotional eating can be eating when you're feeling a certain emotion like stress, terrible winter storm, things like that can all be triggers for emotional eating. Or emotional eating can also be any time that you're eating when you're not actually feeling hungry and you're actually feeling full and satisfied. So an example of that I like to give is if you're eating out of boredom or loneliness, or you've just had a day where you're sitting on the couch and you find yourself going to the pantry when you're not really hungry, that can actually be a form of emotional eating. And then also eating under stressful times, or even eating as a reward. Say, I feel like I'm going to use last week as an example, this entire presentation, but say you got through last week, you survived it, and then you finally get everything back in order and you sit down, you're like, man, I really want to have X food. That's another form of emotional eating. And so it's really something that it's not necessarily one instance that can be emotional eating. It's actually very diverse, very unique. And with that, there's a couple of misconceptions with emotional eating. And part of what I really wanted to spend this presentation talking about is that emotional eating isn't necessarily always a bad thing. But then it also does not mean that you don't have enough control. It doesn't mean that there's something inherently wrong with you. That's not really true. And so I hope this presentation can help you understand what goes behind the, okay, sorry, I just got a chat about, here, let me shut that off. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But so all emotional eating is not necessarily a bad thing. And so in a lot of situations, sometimes it can be your only way to cope with a situation in that exact moment. And I'll go through kind of what I mean by that can be your only coping mechanism. But if it's your only coping mechanism, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. In the moment, it can be really good. And probably in the moment, you're better off to deal with those emotions than to suppress them and try to deal with them later. Because ultimately what happens is you build up those emotions, you build up how you're feeling and everything, and it can manifest in a really negative way. So this can actually be a way to help cope with emotions in certain situations. And like I said, it's not always a positive, it's not always a negative. It's definitely got a time and a place. But emotional eating also does not mean that you don't have enough self-control. It doesn't mean that you're a terrible person or you don't have what it takes to stay on a diet. And that's what we'll go ahead and hop into for the next slide. So something to understand about.
I'm sorry, Carly, to interrupt, but
No, go ahead.
we're having for some reason your slide deck isn't popping up onto the screen, and
Josh,
I'm trying to.
all you need to do is click on it. If you click on it in the little ribbon at the bottom, it will become the main thing you see.
I just want to make sure that the slide deck is in the recording.
Yeah, Josh, we can see it actually. So it might be just your, yeah, we can see it. You can do it on two screens, I guess, or what have you.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the slide deck is what shows up in the spotlight for the recording of the presentation. But anyway, I'm going to hop off. Please continue, Carly. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no worries. Are we where we need to be, or do I need to change anything?
I think we'll just keep going forward with this.
Okay.
And we'll wait till the end and see.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so with emotional eating, something that a lot of people I don't think fully understand is that it is actually a biochemical, biological response that your body has to certain stimulus. So I have a couple of examples here. These are not actually all encompassing. There's so many different hormone cascades, but this is just to help you understand that really in stressful times when you feel hungry or you feel cravings for foods, you're really fighting something that's very biological and inherent within us as humans. So my first example is when you eat foods that taste good to you, it doesn't matter what the food is, whatever you're eating, if it tastes good to you, there's actually a response in your brain and it releases dopamine. And this is actually something that on scans they can prove, they can show. And so your body releases the dopamine. That's a pleasure hormone, and that's what makes you feel good. And I'll talk about this in the next slide, but essentially what happens is your body releases that dopamine and you get this really brief good feeling. But then as time wears on, you start losing that good feeling and your body starts craving more of it. And so that's what happens when you start feeling like you're out of control around the food, is because your body is literally telling you that it wants more dopamine and it wants more of that food. And so it kind of creates this cycle where you want more of that food and you need more of that food to get that pleasure hormone. And then another example is during times of stress, you release cortisol, which causes your insulin levels to actually increase. And with that increase in insulin levels, it causes your metabolism to kick up. And so, if you have gone through a really stressful week and you feel like you're just hungry all the time, a lot of that is a biological response to that increase in metabolism. But then it also is triggering your body to crave really high fat, sugary foods because it's craving foods to store as energy. And those are going to be those foods that are going to give it a lot of energy. And then the third example is tryptophan is a precursor to serotonin. In order for you to create tryptophan, you have to have carbohydrates. So if you are low in serotonin or whatever is going on within your body, you actually can crave more carb-heavy foods to help your body regulate those serotonin levels. And these are very basic descriptions of these cascades within your body. They're definitely a lot more complicated than what I dove into, but essentially what I want you guys to understand here is that when you are experiencing times that you feel like you're emotionally eating, or you're really hungry, or you're really stressed and you're craving certain foods, a lot of that is just a biological mechanism in your body. It doesn't mean that you are not doing well on your diet, or that you don't have enough self-control. It's something that is actually your body triggering you to crave more food. And so this is the cycle of emotional eating that I was talking about. So you're not feeling so great, you're feeling stressed, you're feeling sad, whatever the emotion is. So then you go to eat to distract from that emotion. And this is where you get that trigger of dopamine within your body. Once you start releasing that dopamine, you're like, oh man, I feel a little bit better. I'm feeling some relief. And then you ride that high for just a little bit. And then after you start coming back down from that high, you start thinking about what you just ate. And it's, oh man, I did a really terrible thing because I ate XYZ food. And then you start getting into this really negative self-talk, and you start kind of spiraling down from there. And then you start feeling bad again. And then you're looking for another distraction. And so it really is something that is a vicious cycle that you are forcing yourself to jump into that circle. And so really the key to emotional eating is finding a way to break that cycle without really spiraling down further. Okay, so these are my tips for emotional eating. And as I was putting this together, I was kind of chuckling to myself, because this is actually something, as a mom of a very, very up and down toddler, is something that I tried to emphasize a lot with him, because I think this is a powerful tool for all different types of ways to handle emotional stress. And so this is what I recommend for emotional eating. So the first step is you want to identify your emotions. So it's as simple as, I'm feeling something, am I feeling sad? Am I feeling lonely? Am I feeling stressed? And it's as simple as just identifying what emotion you're feeling. And then I think the second step is actually probably the most difficult for people. And that's accepting the feelings. And accepting, what I mean by that is not challenging, not trying to change. You've identified and you accept that you feel that way. At least for me personally, I know that when I'm feeling certain emotions and I start to identify them, one of my first things to do is like, well, I shouldn't be feeling that way because, X, Y, Z, that's not a good emotion to feel, or I shouldn't feel that way. And so for me, it's really challenging to just accept that feeling. Don't try to suppress it. Don't try to fight it. Just give yourself that permission to feel that way. And then the third step is you want to find a way to express yourself. So that can look so different for so many different people. It can be journaling, it can be talking to a professional, it can be talking to a loved one. Whatever it is, you want to find a way for you to, in a healthy way, express that emotion. And then from there, once you've gone through those first three steps, you're actually able to choose a way that you're able to soothe yourself. So whether that's having a cookie because you have had a really rough day and you just want a little bit of a pick-me-up, or maybe it's going for a run. There's so many different ways for you to handle those emotions, but once you kind of go through these 4 steps, it enables you to make a more conscious decision and a better decision that overall is going to help you move on from whatever emotion that you're feeling. So another one of my tips is to simply find a different way to cope with everyday stressors. So say it's something that you don't necessarily eat when you're sad, but if you're really stressed, you find that you're constantly going back and forth to the pantry. This is probably where I would steer you first, is just finding healthy ways to get rid of that stress. One of the best ways to deal with stress is exercise, whether that is walking, running, cycling, swimming, whatever that looks like. It's a great way to help manage stress Meditating is a great resource. Calling a friend, speaking to a therapist, speaking to a professional. And then self-care is another great option. And self-care can look so different for so many different people. It can be, taking a hot bath. It can be, going on a walk by yourself. It can be getting a pedicure, whatever works, whatever makes you just feel like you're making time for yourself is a great way to manage stress. And then I have here, if all else fails, set a 5-minute rule. And what I mean by that is when you're feeling overwhelmed, stressed, and you find yourself wanting to go and eat food for comfort, simply just set a timer for 5 minutes. And what that does is that makes you stop and really think about like why you're feeling the way you're feeling. And it helps you evaluate emotions, identify what's going on, and then even go through those 4 steps that I talked about on the previous slide, and just kind of slows you down long enough to identify, do you actually want to eat that food? Do you not? And just kind of gives you a little bit of a pause to decide how you want to proceed. So another tip that I have is to keep healthy snacks on hand. And what I mean by that is not necessarily like a full pantry clean out. Don't ever keep junk food in your pantry, which I'm not saying to stock your pantry with junk food, but I think there's a place for certain kind of foods. But I also know that the more you keep nutrient-dense foods on hand and easy for you to access, the more likely you are to eat those foods during times that you're hungry, that you're stressed, or that you want to snack. So you just want to keep options available for you. So that can be as simple as keeping a piece of whole fruit, like an apple, oranges, bananas. You can do sliced vegetables. One of my favorite snacks right now is, baby carrots and some ranch. Yes, the ranch is a little bit high in fat and calories, but I'm not using a ton of ranch, and it's helping me eat those baby carrots. So it's still a better option than some alternatives. String cheese and yogurt and granola. There's so many different things that you can keep on hand, but the key is having it easily accessible. And something that my husband has actually been doing, because he is the king of just mindless eating, is he actually, at the beginning of every week, he pre-portions out celery sticks, carrots, cucumbers, things like that, and puts them in little baggies. So whenever he gets the urge to go and munch on things, he already has something pre-portioned, pre-packaged. He just has to grab it out of the refrigerator. And so it's really easy to help just steer him in the right direction and help him make a better decision when he hits those times. Okay, and then my next tip is to simply keep a food journal or a diary, and not necessarily something where you have to write down every single thing that you're eating. More what I think would be worth documenting here, and this is actually more of a mindfulness practice. So you can always track what you're eating and like the quantities, but more what I would be interested in is for you to write down how you're feeling when you're eating certain types of food. So, if you find yourself eating lots of ice cream at night, you're just taking a moment to jot down and like try to evaluate, why am I eating this food right now? How am I feeling when I eat this food? But then also, and if you guys have attended a lot of my presentations, you guys have probably seen this scale 100 times now, but really using that hunger fullness scale. So it's a scale from 1 to 10, and it's basically just giving a ranking from 1 to 10 on how hungry or how full you are. So 5 is in the very middle. That means that you are physically full. You have no signs of hunger. You ate within the past hour and you feel very satisfied. 1 is that you are on the verge of passing out. You're dizzy, you're nauseous, you're shaky. You need to eat something very, very quickly. Otherwise, you are going to be sick. And then 10 is where you have eaten so much food that you are physically hurting on the verge of being sick. And so using that scale to help identify when you're eating foods, was I hungry? Was I not? How hungry was I? What was I craving? Can really be very insightful into why you're eating a certain way or why you're choosing to eat those foods, and just kind of gives you a little bit more insight into how you're feeling. Okay, and then my last tip for emotional eating, and this is probably next to the 4 steps that I talked about on that first slide, is probably one of the biggest tips I would tell you for emotional eating. And it's to just heal your relationship with food. And what I mean by that is a lot of times people have developed just really negative relationships around food. If I were to ask you, do you view food positively as something that you enjoy or just as something as a necessity that you have to survive? A lot of times people will answer, it's just something that I have to survive. It adds a lot of stress, guilt, etc. And so really working on your relationship with food and essentially eliminating any food rules, because there's so many different ways to eat, so many different food preferences. It does not dictate your self-worth, how you eat. And so really healing that relationship and then focusing on just listening to your body when you're hungry, what it's craving. And this also allows you to make more rational food choices. You'll notice in that cycle of emotional eating, one of the things that causes you to really spiral down is any kind of negative self-talk or food guilt. And by having food rules and things like that, it really contributes to that negative self-talk and that food guilt and that spiraling down. So we really want to eliminate that and focus more on just fueling your body to the point where you feel happy and satisfied and you feel very content with where it is. And I feel like this could be a whole other topic in itself, so I'll kind of leave it at that. But that's one of the biggest tips I would tell you for just emotional eating and overall mental health, is to just focus on having a really healthy relationship with the foods that you put in your body. And of course, I wanted to call out some resources that are available to y'all. I know that 2020 into 2021 has just really been a unique year. So there are so many resources available to y'all. Staywell has one-on-one coaching calls with a trained health coach that you're able to really dive a lot deeper into food choices and things like this emotional eating. But then even Staywell is doing a session on mindful eating through the month of February. So that's a really great resource. And then they have even more resources available on their portal. So definitely something I would tell you guys to seek out and to look into and to utilize. I love the Staywell girls. They do a great job, and these are some really great resources. So in conclusion, emotional eating is just really moments of consuming large amounts of food during emotional time. This is reflecting a biological response in your body. It's not necessarily something where you are you don't have enough self-control or anything like that. It's more of a biological response. And then finding ways and identifying ways to cope with those everyday stresses and emotions is one of the best ways for you to fight emotional eating and to really break that vicious cycle. So with that is all I have on that. But as always, I am more than happy to take any questions. I'm going to pop over to the chat box and see if we have any questions so far. And if you guys do have questions, you all are welcome to unmute yourself and ask it. You're welcome to drop it in the chat box, whatever works for you. And it looks like we have a suggestion from Susan. I keep small bags of nuts or peanut butter in my glove box, so while I'm out shopping, I can nibble on them instead of pulling over for fast food. That's a really great idea and a great option. I love the preparedness is always a really good solution just for making better decisions. And it looks like no real questions so far, but as always, I'll kind of hang out here for a little bit and answer any questions that you guys might have. Okay. I feel like I used to eat only healthy snacks when emotional eating, and it would still add to my weight. It worked only when I got on a healthy eating with strict meal plans, excluding snacks completely. And so I think that's really interesting, and actually a very common thing for people to, I guess, binge or eat a lot of or excessive amounts of a snack that is deemed healthy, because it's something in their mind that they've told themselves it's okay to eat because it's healthy. And so it's really common for people to struggle with those snacks, and those are snacks that they tend to overdo it on. And so I think this is really insightful that you had experience with that, and that part of the solution was just to completely eliminate those snacks completely. And my follow-up question to that would be, do you find yourself missing those snacks, or was it just something that you were doing more mindlessly versus something that you're actually enjoying? But that's a really great point. Oh, sounds like lost your audio. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I hope you guys heard my spiel on that, but I think it was Camilla. Thank you for sending that in. Okay. But yeah, if you guys, like I said, any other questions, happy to answer them, happy to stick around, even if it's not necessarily related to emotional eating. I'm here to answer any questions. All right, it looks like lots of you are hopping off, lots of thank yous. I'm so glad you guys are able to attend. Glad that we were able to reschedule this. So you guys are welcome to hop off. I'll stick around for a couple minutes and answer any last minute questions. Thank you guys, everyone, for attending and all the sweet compliments. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good afternoon.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Carly. Sorry for the interruptions. I was having trouble with my Wi-Fi during the presentation too. That was the audio. The audio just kind of quit, and then it ended up like my whole Wi-Fi quit on me. So anyway.
No worries. I've totally experienced that too. I feel like that's the story of working from home.
Yeah. Thanks for the presentation, Carly. It was great.
Thanks, everyone. I hope you all have a good afternoon.